Good morning. It's the 25th of February and today is the ordinary council meeting, Ipswich City Council, and we're opening the meeting at 9 a.m. The first item on business is noting attendance, and we have an apology from Councillor Kunzelman, who's unwell. So I therefore move a motion of leave of absence for her. Do I have a seconder for that leave of absence? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll put that to the vote for a leave of absence for Councillor Kunzelman. Thank you very much. I see that that's unanimous, and I note that all other members of the council are here as well. We now move on to the acknowledgement of country, and I'll hand over to Councillor Johnnick.
Thank you. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the land upon which we meet. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, as the keepers of the traditions, cultures and stories of a proud people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnnick. Deputy Mayor, I'll invite you to lead us into prayer.
Heavenly Father, grant that we who seek to serve you in the affairs of this council may have wisdom in our deliberations, the guiding of your hand in our works, and the grace to serve together to advance the prosperity of our city. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We've done the apologies and leave of absence, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the condolences, and there are no condolences. Item 6, tributes, there are no tributes. Number 7, presentation of petitions, there are no petitions. Item 8, presentations and deputations, there are none. And 9, public participation, there are none. We now move on to item 10, which are the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for today's meeting? Thank you, Councillor Fickner.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act of 2009, I, Councillor Andrew Fickner, inform the meeting that I have declarable conflict of interest in item number 14.6, entitled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's Report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is my business interest in both A1A Proprietary Limited and Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited, located in the top of town in Ipswich, and I plan on dealing with this by leaving the room while the matter is discussed and voted on.
Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Madsen.
In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 14.6, titled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's Report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is I'm a member of the executive of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labor Day Committee, and our building, the Ipswich Trades Hall, is immediately adjacent to this CBD redevelopment works. As a result of my conflict, I will now leave, I will leave the meeting room while the matter is discussed and voted on, and scripts always trip me up for some reason. It's not my words.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madsen. Are there any other declarations of interest? I can see none. And just a reminder that at any time the councillors or CEO can notify me of any declarations of interest. We'll now move on to item 11, which is the confirmation of the minutes. And may I please have a mover for the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Fickner. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Wigan. I now open the minutes up for discussion. There being no discussion, I then move that these are accepted. Please raise your hand if you are in agreement. It is unanimous. Thank you. And passed. Move on to item 12, which is mayoral minute, and there is none at this meeting. So we move on to item 13, business outstanding, including conduct matters and matters lying on the table to be dealt with. And we do have an item, 13.1, unreasonable customer conduct policy. May I have someone move this paper, this report? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions on this policy? No, I guess I'll just ask you, CEO, if you'd like to outline the principles and the reasons for it.
Yeah, look, this this policy is in place or something similar in many government institutions.
So your live stream. Let's start again.
Sorry. A policy similar to this is in place in many government institutions and particularly local governments to deal with situations where people either are particularly persistent on a specific complaint or raise large amounts of complaints on a range of issues. We have a process whereby we work out at what point can we take it no further. There are third-party places to go. For example, the ombudsman, they can raise their issues with the ombudsman if they're not happy with the results provided by council. But ultimately, this allows council to say, in certain circumstances, we will cease or restrict the amount of activity we provide to individuals on either particular matters or in general terms, because they raise very, very large amounts of items on a whole range of issues. A previous organisation I worked in, we had one particular member of the public who wrote 1,000 letters in a year, and the cost of responding to 1,000 letters in a year is incredibly expensive. So we have to be fair to all the residents and ratepayers of the city in terms of provision of service. And this is just to make sure that some people don't demand and receive an incredible amount of service, which to the detriment of providing service to the rest of the community.
And CEO, has this been socialised with the staff, obviously, who are at our service centre, who obviously work very closely with the public?
Yes, both service centre staff and our CMU staff, and obviously...
So CMU being...
Our customer management unit staff who deal with advanced matters that are unable to be satisfied initially by the customer service centre. And of course, there will be interaction with elected representatives as well, because typically people who have concerns will also raise those matters with elected reps.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other questions? I'll open that up for discussion. No, I guess just to reiterate our policy of if anyone wants to contact the service centre, they can on 3810 6666 or at council@ipswich.qld.gov.au. And I encourage people to utilise that, but they also can contact their local councillor as well. And I strongly encourage people, if they're not being satisfied with those there, to also contact us for like they are at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just also like to make a comment and thank the CMU staff. I know they have worked a lot of hours in reviewing this policy and making sure it's fair and in step with community expectations. So, thank you.
Yes, certainly, CEO.
Sorry, the other point that I didn't make is that it's also to deal with in our public service areas, for example, the library, and interactions where people perhaps are also aggressive or abusive as well, and allows us to withdraw service and deny them access to service in certain circumstances as well. And from time to time that occurs.
Thank you. Also note the report stating that the New South Wales Ombudsman Office advises that unreasonable customer conduct can take approximately 25 to 30% of an organisation's resources. And in some cases, this can be a large amount of the organisation's complaint handling resources, as well as the time and attention of senior managers. So it's good to see a fair and balanced and reasonable approach. Thank you. There being no other comment, I put the report to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And I see that's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to our committee reports. And the first one is 14.1, the Growth and Infrastructure and Waste Committee. Now, that committee has its own delegation, so this report is just noting that report. May I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Lincoln. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Would anyone like to discuss any parts of the GIW committee report? There being none, I'll then put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see it's unanimous and passed. Thank you. We now move on to the item 14.2, the Governance and Transparency Committee. May I have, I guess, the chair move that report? Certainly thank you, Councillor Madsen. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. I'll now hand over to the chair of that report to, I guess, to speak to that report.
It's a pretty standard piece of business last week, a couple of procurement matters, a couple of land resumptions for council projects on roads and stormwater. I'd recommend that they just be adopted in full.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open, does anyone want to ask the relevant council officer any questions on that committee report? There being none, I'll open up for discussion. There being none, we then move on to the vote on this report being accepted. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 14.3, which is the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee report. And that motion is the report on the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee, 2020-05 of the 3rd of December. Sorry, I'm reading the minutes from that previous one. That the Council adopt the recommendations of the Community Culture and Arts Sports Committee report of the 11th of February 2021. Now I assume, Councillor Fickner, that you'll be moving that as the chair of that?
Yeah, so we won't be moving all of the recommendations within the committee report. So I propose that we adopt the recommendations of item 1 through 7 with the exclusion of item number 4. Thank you. As Councillor Tully has an amendment proposal for us. But just generally speaking, with regards to the committee, we got to celebrate lots of wonderful things at committee last week. Highlights including endorsing the program of works associated with the 2021 Ipswich Art Awards program. We get to join a national program of welcoming cities to no great cost to the ratepayer, but a wonderful benefit to the community. And then some event sponsorships in the gathering and the yearly Ipswich Cup, which I'm sure lots of us are looking forward to. And the distribution finally of the Christmas Wonderland income to those charities. So we got to celebrate lots of really wonderful things at committee last week. So I propose that we move the recommendations of the committee to the exclusion of item number 4.
Okay, so we're looking at moving items 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Johnick. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer anything about these items? No, I'll open it up for discussion. I think the only thing is I know that there's, I want to thank the council officers for coming up with the idea of the Christmas Wonderland. And I'm looking across at some of the team there. It's been really well received by the community that local charities were able to participate. It certainly helped us out with our manpower, but also gave local charities the opportunity to collect money. So thank you, Chair, for the chair of that committee. Any other discussion? In that case, I'll put that motion to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see that's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 4 of that paper, which is on the Ipswich City Hearts Cabs review. I guess, Councillor Tully, since you're wanting to move an amendment to that, did you wish to move it with an amendment that you've put forward?
Well, perhaps the chair wishes to
Okay.
move the principal motion.
Okay. Councillor Fickner, would you like to move this with an amendment?
Yep. So just for reference, we're on page 72, so that we can follow. So the recommendation that the attached report, Ipswich City Heart Cab Review, be received and the contents noted. Happy to move that. And then recommendation B, would you like me to propose the amendment while moving? Thank you. So we'll move both of these together, but I'll be recommending that we change part
B2?
2 of B, so that it reads, and I'll just get the words here.
It's on the screen too, the variation.
Oh, thank you, Vicky. So that community welcome, we develop a messaging and communications plan that highlight, I beg your pardon. Yeah. That council officers develop a communication plan and change management program, and then we're inserting, including the examination and communication of all alternative arrangements for existing users, to effectively discontinue the current form of the Ipswich City Hearts program.
Yes. Yeah, it does sound that it is different to what was emailed around, which is fine. I'll just let Councillor Feck know. Yep.
So Councillor Tully just wanted to add after the word program.
Including examination, communication of all alternative.
I interpreted that correctly. Thank you, Councillor Tully.
So I think we're after. Could you read out what you said before? Is it what Councillor Tully has proposed, or is it? Do you
That
have
is
separate
correct,
wording?
yeah.
Okay. So in that case, B2 would read, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, council officers develop a communication and change management program to effectively discontinue the current form of the Ipswich City Hearts CAB program, including examination and communication of all alternative arrangements for existing users. Would that be correct? Yep.
Thank you. Great, thank you.
Okay. So you've moved that. Councillor Taylor, I assume that you're seconding
I will.
that? I'll then open it up for discussion on the floor. Yes, Councillor Tully?
Yeah, just the reason for the additional words, when officer been told... Oh, sorry.
Just for clarification, for the purposes of the additional words, when Officer Ben Pole first raised this, I think there were some key issues. One was the diminishing numbers of people who are taking advantage of this, but the possibility that some people might fall through the cracks, I guess. And I think we need to spell out, in addition to existing B, which is B2, which talks about the discontinuation of the program. I just wanted to highlight that we'd look at the various alternatives, and some of them are very clear to us, some of them are perhaps not so clear, just to pick up those. And I think I did mention this previously, I think at a workshop, that we just need to make sure. And I think the privacy and confidentiality could be covered by providing some documentation to the taxi company to the drivers to physically give that information to the users in advance of any changes. So it's just to clarify that there's a little bit of an extension, that we're focusing on the users rather than just the decision to terminate the program.
And Councillor Taylor, 2 weeks ago at the committee meeting that Councillor Fechner chaired, there was a big discussion about the 70 to 80 users, that the people, residents who use this. We don't have any clarity on who they are because of how it's, I'll say, the lack of governance in the system, and yet it was costing, the ratepayer $15,000 a year. So that was discussed quite extensively, and I think B3 also, we added that, from memory, Councillor Fechner, that council officers investigate opportunities for reallocation of funds to more effectively to achieve outcomes for the Ipswich City Council City Hearts CAB program. So yeah, very much front and centre of our mind. I don't know, Councillor Fechner, if you'd like to speak to it, but it was very front and centre of our mind that no resident is left behind.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Tully for tightening up the recommendation to encapsulate the sentiment of the change management program that we've been working with the department with anyway. So it really highlights, us as elected representatives wanting to make sure that no one falls through the cracks. But I have every faith upon liaising with particularly Melissa Dower from that department, that she will do everything within her power to make sure that every single person who ever accessed this program will be taken care of at the discontinuation of the City Heart CAB program.
Thank you. And there was much discussion last time too, Councillor Tully, about since this program was initiated, there's NDIS, My Aged Care and a whole raft of other state and federal government programs that just never existed when this commenced. Any other discussion? There being no other discussion, I'll put the item 4 of that paper to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We now move to item 14.4, which is the Economic and Industry Development Committee. And that recommendation is that the Council adopt the recommendations of the Economic and Industry Development Committee report of the 11th of February 2021. And I'll speak to the Chair. Councillor Jonick, did you wish to move that
Yes, I'll
report?
move that.
And may I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll then hand over to the Chair of that committee to speak to it.
So I'd just like to move both items together, but I did want to invite Ms Madsen down to the lectern to just chat about the second item, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Noting that it's quite a substantial pipeline and it got a little bit of publicity. I just wanted to basically reiterate to our residents that might not have caught the committee about what it's all about.
Well, Councillor Jonick, now's your time to speak to it.
I'm excited about it, obviously. All of the items in that pipeline are things that weren't going to happen in our city anyway. So it's things that our economic development team are actively working on, solidifying in our city, which is so exciting. But Kat has more words, so please come to the lectern, Kat.
So I invite
Miss Madsen,
relevant
sorry.
council officer. Please state your name and your job title, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Kat Matson, Manager for Economic and Community Development, and thank you, Councillor Jonick, for the invitation to speak. This report was really exciting to write, 6 months into the role, and amid a lot of narrative around so much needs to happen in Ipswich. It's really exciting to actually say that a lot is happening in Ipswich. The focus of the economic development team within council is very simple: local business growth, local jobs and local investment. I did present in that report a pipeline that represents something around the number of $565 million of impact, and that's direct impact. You can see in other councils that they report economic impact in all sorts of funny ways. This impact is dollars into the region. And in fact, since this report was presented, we've since had a couple of new projects enter that pipeline. For example, head offices looking to expand into regional centres, and Ipswich is a prime contender. In terms of the pipeline, just to highlight for viewers and for people reading the minutes afterwards, we did see last week the announcement of MaxiTrans coming to Ipswich and opening their new facility here. That represents 70 new jobs for the region now, with another 100 to come. Ipswich City Council's role from an economic development perspective in that was actually working with our state government counterparts to secure MaxiTrans coming to Ipswich rather than going to any of the other contending cities, including interstate. Currently in the pipeline, we've got a food manufacturer who's looking for a new site for expansion. When that is realised, that will represent 165 jobs and $1.2 million in investment. There's also a business in the manufacturing sector also looking for a new site for expansion, representing $11 million and 120 jobs. We'd all be familiar with the hotel in the old courthouse, which is a project that represents 125 jobs and $13 million. And overall, that $565 million in the pipeline represents a total of 550 jobs. So it is really exciting. And I think the only other thing that I wanted to say, Mayor and councillors and Chair, is the role of economic development in a local council is a really interesting one. We facilitate a lot of conversations. We lobby, we advocate, we work with state and federal counterparts to secure significant projects for the region. And whilst a lot of the time we don't see the output until a new building goes up or a new business arrives into the region, rest assured that there is lots of work going on to bring new investment and to drive industry in the region.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank you and the team for that sometimes silent work. that goes behind the scenes, and you don't reach fruition for many years sometimes until things are built, and then we celebrate. So thank you for the passion behind closed doors.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor.
Just want to take the opportunity to
Microphones.
Sorry, Ms Madsen. I just want to take the opportunity while you're up here, if you wouldn't mind speaking to one little issue, being our Ipswich Central master plan. I note that retiring General Manager from the Ipswich Turf Club, Brett Kitching, actually spoke to, the issue of Ipswich needing to work out what its identity is going forward. We'd previously been mining, rail, blue collar. So, you know, as we're encouraging and welcoming new industries and businesses setting up in Ipswich, can you just speak to what we're doing about defining who we are?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and that's a fantastic question. The Ipswich Central project that we're currently working on looks to do exactly that, define the central region of Ipswich beyond just the old CBD of the region, but what does it look like moving into the future, and what do we stand for? It's too early for me to call out the priority industries, but we've seen just this morning that West Moreton Health have announced, of course, their health master plan, which will have a significant impact on this region. So from our perspective and an economic development lens, we're looking at, well, how do we provide the complementary services? How do we attract professional services to support the West Moreton Health? What are the other emerging industries in important sectors? For example, circular economy and waste changes across the globe as well as across Australia lend itself to a product stewardship specialisation, which again brings professional services. A visit to the RAF Amberley base yesterday demonstrated that their workforce plans are going to need a lot of talent on base, but support services here. So the work that's currently being undertaken is positioning, framework, what is the identity of Ipswich Central, then creating, for want of a better word, an investment prospectus that we can take to market and say this is who Ipswich Central is. Behind the scenes then is a governance piece around how do we all collectively work together within council so that everything is integrated at the same time, from traffic management, from planning, from parking, from the economic development, from the community development, making sure that it is all working together and that collectively we're all driving the desired change for the region.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also know, Councillor Ms Matson,
Not
sorry. I keep saying that obviously last year Saab Australia were awarded a $270 million contract from the Department of Defence for Joint Project 2060 Phase 3, which is a deployable health capability, and it's a project that will acquire 3 modular scalable field hospitals, 1 for the Air Force and 2 for the Army, and that will provide deployed trauma services to meet no-day performance targets, and each field hospital, we'll call it hard and soft shelters, and I see that's now public that that they have decided to set that up in Ipswich as well.
And so what that means for us, Mayor, is that we have a construction of a facility in Ipswich that will enable that, as well as the ongoing both on-site jobs with Saab, but again, the catalyst that provides. So if Saab are creating mobile health units, which for those who aren't familiar like I was, think a modern version of MASH, literally gets lifted, put onto a plane and shipped into wherever it's needed. That creates all sorts of opportunities for us to attract medtech companies, of which South East Queensland already has a high specialisation, support personnel, logistics personnel who actually want to get behind that kind of thing. So it's not just about Saab and their site, it's the catalyst that ripples through for the region.
And I guess the skill set, I mean, we've got the skill set here. I mean, this project will create 2 operating theatres, 4 intensive care beds, a 20-bed ward, ancillary services such as X-ray, CT imaging, laboratory diagnostics and dental services. So that is all deployable out in either in a peacekeeping area or in a war zone.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you combine that with the expansion that's happening with West Moreton Health, essentially Ipswich is going to become the centre of advanced medical and healthcare here for South East Queensland, but also servicing the world.
Wonderful. Exciting. Any other questions for Ms Matson? No, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. I'll now open the matter up for discussion. There being no discussion, I guess you're happy? Okay, in that way I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. We now move on to item 14.5, which is the Environment and Sustainability Committee report. And that recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Environment and Sustainability Committee report of the 11th of February 2021. I assume that the committee chair, Councillor Milligan, you will be moving that.
Thank you, Mayor.
And may I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ireland. I'll now move to you, Councillor Milligan, to move and speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. The one item of new business from that committee report is item 2, the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium annual contribution. That matter was very effectively explained to us from the floor by Natural Environment and Land Manager from IED, Infrastructure and Environment Department, that Ipswich City Council commit the funds as described in the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officers on this matter? No? I'll then open the matter for discussion. There being none, I'll now move the recommendation. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 14.6, which is the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report. And that recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report of 11th of February 2021. And my apologies, I'll wait until Councillor Fittner and Councillor Madsen leave. Thank you. I'll start again. Now looking at item 14.6, that Council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee report of the 11th of February 2021. I assume the Chair would like to move that report.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah,
Yes,
yes.
I'll just get a seconder for that report. Councillor Johnick. Thank you. And I'll move to you, Deputy Mayor, to speak to it.
Thank you. I recommend that we adopt the recommendations in full. That is items 1 to 3. I'd just like to make a general comment that at last week's committee meeting, I guess there was nothing material, there were no material changes that we needed to alert the public to. Just generally, I'd like to make the comment that the Nicholas Street project team are working extremely hard across a number of items down there within the CBD redevelopment, including overseeing the construction in the final stages of the administration building, which I note has continued on track, on time and on budget, as well as overseeing the very complicated project being the redevelopment of the Commonwealth Hotel. And I guess the second issue that the project team are constantly working on relates to the leasing of the spaces down in the CBD. And I was just wondering if Mr Madigan would like to just generally provide some comments just for residents to understand the sentiment that is around at the moment with regard to leasing. As an observer at the Retail Subcommittee meeting last week, I was delighted to learn about the very positive interest from prospective tenants and investors in the market, and it's great news for residents and Ipswich that there's a strong return to confidence in Ipswich and our CBD, both from external parties, private investors and government agencies. So thank you, Mr Madigan.
Ask Mr Madigan. Would you mind stating your name and your job title, please?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Sean Madigan, Acting General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment.
Thank you, Mr Madigan. I know you can't, obviously for confidentiality reasons, speak to specific leases, but if you just wouldn't give us a general snapshot of what's going on in that space.
Yes, certainly. It's fair to say that over the last 6 weeks or so, we have seen a high level of engagement from industry in relation to leasing the various spaces across the Nicholas Street precinct, including level 2 of the council administration building, the bar/cafe area that sits on the Nicholas Street. So we are in confidential discussions with a prominent local business with a view to expanding their footprint in the city and operating that bar. We have the cinema EOI is out in the market, and early indication is there's significant interest there as well. So we are looking to attract a large volume of both local businesses expanding and improving on the service delivery, as well as international brands coming into the precinct. We didn't see this momentum towards the end of last year, and COVID was a complication surrounding that. However, in the last, as I said, 6 weeks or so, the interest in the market has really increased and shows really positive signs. The Commonwealth Hotel, you'll be pleased to hear that we are in discussions and negotiations with 2 different parties to bring that back to a functional hotel. And the construction on that is due to be finished in about March, and then a fit out for an operator from that point onwards. So we are very confident of having a fully leased or mostly fully leased precinct, certainly by the end of this year, up and running and providing a real destination for the people of Ipswich.
Thank you, Mr Madigan. I guess in the community that is one of the questions people commonly ask about the space. They're so excited now to have experienced the civic space, Torma Place, and when will the food outlets arrive? So that's positive. I just would like to highlight one of the items you raised, and that relates to leasing of level 2 of the council administration building. This is a public asset, belongs to the people of Ipswich, the administration building, and it's great to see that it will be working for the money invested, and leasing of level 2 will provide significant rental income.
Yes, yeah. I will just mention, so we have recently conducted a valuation of the new council administration building. The construction cost of that project is approximately $95 million. Our latest valuation for it as an ongoing tenanted building is approximately $145 million. So that is the uplift and the important investment of council, and there is a significant return on investment there that exists for council in terms of the asset that has been built.
Yes. What a turnaround.
Yeah, fantastic. And, highlight that it's not just a house for the bureaucrats, it's there working for the people of Ipswich.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Leading on from the Deputy Mayor, the 2 questions we get asked the most about the area, because there is so much excitement, is when will the cafes will be there? So I think some people thought there'll be some now, so it's good for people to know that it will look at the end of the year. But also the cinema. Do you have an update on? I know it's not signed, it's an EOI, but when do you think that would be ready?
We would anticipate the cinema to be up and running early in the next year.
Thank you.
But we expect to have cafes and various offerings up and running by around about September of this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Madigan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Madigan. I now open the matter up for discussion. I just note that this week we've been having the community reference groups, and so the CBD comes up at every single one of them. There is so much excitement. People love the library there, the space there, and obviously, like you said, Deputy Mayor, people are dying to have a coffee after they go to the library, but also to see all they're just loving the fact that the space is there with the Valentine's Day orchestra that was there, with the sounds of the Switch festival. It was really, really great to see. Yeah. Is there any other discussion on the matter? No, I'll put the matter to the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. And I'll just pause while we wait for Councillor Fichtner and Councillor Madsen to return. I note for the record that Councillor Madsen and Councillor Fichtner have returned to the room. We'll now move on to item 15.1, which is an officer report on the resolution to close public land 2020-21 fire season fuel reduction program, and that recommendation is that council resolve to exercise the power under section 10.1 of Local Law 7 to close public access to areas of council's natural area estates to enable a planned schedule of hazard reduction burns occurring between the 26th of February 2021 and 30th of September 2021 within 3 council conservation estates, and they are being White Rock Spring Mountain Conservation Estate, Flinders Goulburn Conservation Estate and the Mount Grandchester Conservation Estate. Do I have a mover for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions on this motion? Thank you, Councillor. Who would you like? May we speak to the relevant council officer on this? Thank you. Mr. Smith, would you like to state your name and your job title?
Certainly. Philip Smith, Natural Environment and Land Manager.
Thank you. Councillor Ireland, do you have a question?
I'm just ensuring that you'll send a special notice to Staines Memorial College and Fernbrook State School for kids that have asthma, so that they are aware to have medication on the days that you're doing White Rock, and perhaps also the Redbank Plains Community Centre, because they have disability carers and people with a disability there sometimes. So I think where we're congregating people, we probably need to send a letter directly to them.
So, Mr. Smith, what letters do you send out? In these things?
Yeah, so there's a few communication channels, including text messages that people can subscribe to. So anyone in that locality will get a text message leading up to the day. We also got community channels through links with Springfield and Lend-Lease to push out to their community representatives as well. And we also send letters to everyone within a given vicinity, but we can certainly take that into consideration in terms of any specific needs or requirements if there's any groups, and we can ensure that they're targeted directly with that.
So at this stage the schools aren't
They would
contacted?
they would be contacted.
They are,
but
the schools are contacted?
Yeah, and any other kind of disability care homes or anything like that. But if there's anything that you know of that we may miss, we appreciate that kind of information and feedback in that regard.
I guess the 2 organisations that...
The 3.
The 3,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes,
if
please.
they're minuted and passed on to us, we can ensure that that's definitely done.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Smith? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Iron, would you like to a variation to ensure that those 3 organisations are definitely sent a letter? And
That would,
communicated?
thank you, Mayor.
Yep. So I'll just check. If that's okay with Councillor Milligan, would you like to put a proposed variation up to the 3 organisations, and then the mover and seconder can review them? That was at Staines Memorial,
Yes, College. Fernbrook State School.
Fernbrook State School.
And the Redbank Plains Community Centre.
So it's Fernbrook. So they are sent a letter?
Yes.
Is that what you want? Yep. Advised by letter of the program. Is that the variation you're moving?
Thank you.
May I just check with Councillor Milligan if he's
Yes, Mayor,
okay
that's
for
fine.
that? Deputy Mayor, are you okay with that as the seconder of that motion?
Yes, that's
Yes.
fine.
Okay. So that new motion, we might move it as A and B. If that's okay. So we'll have the recommendation, the report as A, and recommendation B with the variation that Councillor Ireland has moved. Thank you. I now open the matter up for discussion amongst the councillors. There being no other discussion, I'll put both recommendation A and B to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you, it's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item 15.2, Public Monuments and Memorials Assessment of Applications. And there are two recommendations in this report. The first being that the report be received and the contents noted, and B, that the public monuments and memorials applications, as detailed in attachments 3 to 8 of the report by the team lead of Open Space and Facilities, dated the 9th of February 2021, be approved to proceed to the next stage of the application process. May I have a mover of this? Thank you, Councillor Fickner. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Donick. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this?
Apologies, Mayor. I was proposing potentially an amendment to receive an additional report.
Sorry, I could barely hear.
Sorry.
With the rain going on, I can barely hear. So.
Yeah. Apologies, Mayor. I think a variation in relation to a request for a specific report around the Blackhall Monument situated on Denmark Hill, and investigating the costs of relocation of that monument to its original place in Darcy Doyle Place. I understand the footings for that particular monument are there, have been preserved.
So we'll do to the variation first. So we're looking at recommendation C. Is that what you're moving? So if you'd like to...
I just would like to comment, we have previously discussed this.
Before we go to the discussion, I just want to make sure we've got the variation correct.
Okay,
I want
sorry,
to check, just before we speak to it, I want to check with the mover and the seconder, but I'll wait for you, Deputy Mayor, to...
So, sorry, Vicky, after the relocation of the monument, comma, including costs to relocate? Thank you.
So recommendation C is now that a report on the Blackhall Monument on Denmark Hill and the relocation of the monument, including costs to relocate to Darcy Doyle Place, which I believe is the original setting, be provided to the next meeting. Is that the variation you're proposing? May I check with the mover, Councillor Fickner, to this?
Just querying the timeline for council officers on that one. That's an achievable timeline, so...
Okay. So we will check. CEO, will the organisation be able to come back to us in the March meeting with that?
I'm getting shakes of the head.
I'm getting shakes of the head. So April? Am I getting...
It's an engineering issue. Mr. Barraza and Mr. Martin. It's an engineering issue. I'm just looking at Mr. Barraza and Mr. Martin. Give me some sort of an idea about what the...
I understand from Councillor Tully there was some work done previously on this, reviewing that. I think Councillor Tully.
Yeah, I think there was some work done, and the costs were, to put it bluntly, phenomenal.
Yes.
Even though it's probably ideal.
Yeah.
Remember, that was, I think, when it was a through road. Darcy Doyle Place, didn't exist at the time.
That's right.
So that impediment's, no longer relevant.
CEO, so are you, the April meeting, is that?
Well, let's put it in there, and if we can't, we'll
come back. Okay.
It depends. If there has been pre-work done, then it's an easy job. If there hasn't been pre-work done, then there may be, we can do a preliminary report, and we may need to do a more detailed report to get specific costs.
I'll just confirm with the Deputy Mayor.
I'm happy with the
April?
proposed variation, and equally happy if a further extension is needed, noting that this isn't an easy piece of work to do overnight. And I was going to speak to, I'd certainly recall Councillor Tully advising us that previous council have investigated this, and noting the costs were considered unreasonable.
I think you mentioned about $1 million, I think, Councillor Tully, I think.
Yeah. I'm just, I guess, and I've spoken with council officers about this, that this is such a passion project for the residents of Ipswich, and if there is somebody locally that is equally as passionate, that perhaps if it does go to tender, they sharpen their pencil and...
I'll move back to the motion if I can,
sorry.
before we can speak to it. I'll, again, so thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just check with the mover. Now that a time frame has been put in, then...
Yep.
Councillor Fickner, you agree with that?
Yes.
Councillor Jonik, you were the seconder.
Yes,
Are you
I'm fine with
approve
that.
that?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. So obviously, we now have 3 recommendations, and I propose that we'll move each one, I guess, separately, just because they are 3 different things now. So we're looking at recommendation A, that the report be received and the contents noted, and I'll take it that Councillor Fechner and Councillor Jonik have moved and seconded that. Would anyone like to speak to the council officer about the report itself? Any discussion? No, then I'll ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please. Councillor Ireland, you're not, yeah. Thank you. So it's unanimous. Thank you. I now move on to recommendation B, which is that the public monuments and memorials application, as detailed in attachments 3 to 8 of the report by the team lead, open space and facilities, be approved to proceed to the next stage of the application process. May I have a mover for that, please? Thank you. Councillor Doyle. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Would you like to speak? Councillor Milligan. Yeah, Councillor Doyle's the mover. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on these 3 monuments that are being proposed? No? No? Okay. I'll then open it up for discussion on the 3 monuments that are being proposed, which is the Ipswich RSL Public Monuments, the Zonta Club Monument, as well as the Brisbane Bangla Language School and Ethnic School Association monuments. There being no discussion, I'll put recommendation B to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous for that recommendation. Thank you. We'll now move on to C. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move that? And a seconder for that particular. Thank you, Councillor Jonik. I now move over to, would you like to speak to that, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. No, just acknowledging Councillor Tully's comments. I know that previous council did do some work around this, and I'm just keen to revisit it. I've already spoken with council officers. My expectation is that any previous quotes or estimates of costs should be disregarded. We start from scratch and see if there's somebody, certainly locally, a business willing to do this piece of work at a fair price. It would be lovely. It would be great if we could achieve this.
Yeah, thank you.
But obviously, we'll come down to costs.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Tully?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I support this additional recommendation because it's been beavering away in the community for a long time about the appropriateness of it. Obviously, it was a traffic issue many years ago when it was moved. And that is correct what the Deputy says, that we should disregard earlier costs. The problem is that the costs are usually rising. The other issue will be the foundations that were put there originally have been preserved, whether or not they meet current building and construction requirements for a memorial of that size. That will be another consideration that I guess which will come up in the report. But it would be good if it could be done at a reasonable price, particularly now, as I indicated before, that Darcy Doyle Place exists and the traffic issues are negligible.
Thank you. As part of discussion, I note that there is a Facebook page and it's called Put the Blackall Monument Back Where It Belongs. And if you're indulged to read out a bit of information, it says the Blackall Monument is an important part of Ipswich's history. It was the meeting place where people could meet to talk politics and general happenings around town. When cars became popular, it was in the way, and so they moved it to the top of Denmark Hill. Most of our historical photos of the CBD feature this amazing monument, and now that section of Nicholas Street is no longer a street, it's about time we returned it to where it belongs and make it an important tourist feature.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to add that its current location on Denmark Hill is, in the thick of our hospital precinct, and as Westmoreton Health master plan progresses and the health precinct there becomes even busier, there's very limited opportunity for somebody to park, I guess, and appreciate the monument. So it certainly makes sense to move it, but we'll come down to cost. And I'd certainly be interested to know if it's a project council officers, council staff could undertake the physical relocation work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion on this matter? There being not, I'll then move for recommendation C. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and passed. We now move on to item 15.3, the Tea Tree Bioenergy Payments Project Development Process and Governance Framework. There are two recommendations there. Unless there's any objections to move both at the same time, or you'd like, Councillor Lyon, you'd like to move both separately?
Yes, please, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So recommendation A is that Council endorse the list of prioritised projects for delivery in the 2020-2021 using the existing budget of $120,000 that has been allocated in 2020-2021. So I'll take it, Councillor Island, you will move
I'll move
that
that
recommendation A. And a seconder, Councillor Madsen. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on recommendation A? No. I'll then open it up for discussion on recommendation A. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to recommendation B, which is that Council endorse the list of prioritised projects for delivery in 2021-2022 and that a budget allocation of $320,000 be considered in the operational budget for the 2021-2022 to be drawn from the accrued funds of $1.506614. Am I looking for a mover, or are you looking to do a variation?
No, I would like to delete that recommendation, and I've got an alternate one.
Right. Would you like to read it out? Has that been given to Vicky?
That council list all projects on the Transparency Hub with approximate costings for the 2021-22 financial year, and that the WAGS area group and councillors from Division 1 and 4 discuss the decision of the working group before it is considered in the operational budget.
Okay. Has that been given to Vicky? Okay. So
I can give it to you.
So I'll state that out again, Ms. Lucas. That council list all projects on the Transparency and Integrity Hub with approximate costings for the 2021-2022 financial year and that the Willowbank Area Residents Group
Yep.
and Division 1 and 4 councillors discuss the decision of the working group before it is considered in the operational budget. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Island? I put that you're going to move that,
I would like to move
that new recommendation.
recommendation B.
And may I have a seconder for that, Councillor Manson? Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on that? Yes?
Oh, I don't want to
no?
speak to a
You don't want to speak to the
council
relevant
officer,
council
just make
officer?
comment if I can.
Yep. Well, if no one wants to speak to the relevant council, I'll then open the floor up for discussion. Councillor Island.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the WAG group spent 3 years in negotiating with Tea Tree Bioenergy to get this social licence scheme up and running, and the group itself has been running for 20 years. So I certainly would like to see them still engaged in the decisions that we make on the funding that council receives. I just think that that cutting them out of the process, you know, if that's what's going to happen, probably isn't, as a community, the best outcome for Ipswich City Council. And I think that what they ask for and what Councillor Madsen and I have discussed with the CEO is that they would like the total amount that sits in the funding on your transparency
Transparency Integrity Hub.
Yep, that's it. So they'd like the total amount, they'd like the projects that are submitted either by themselves or community members, they'd like it costed, at approximate costings. The next column to show in the 2021 which projects are going to come up and how much they are, and then a balance so that every time we get funding, it's shown up there, so that Tea Tree gets some recognition for the projects that are going to be funded. And I received an email from a member of the executive yesterday afternoon, if you'd allow me to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
He says that I'd further ask that if motion 15.3 is tabled for discussion, I request to place on notice that any expenditure considered for the purchase of tracts of land for koala habitat should be principally funded from the monies collected through the Ipswich Environment Plan per rate notice contributions, with any tea tree contributions being only a partial contribution to assist in funding the project. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Open up for any other comments? Yes, Councillor Madsen.
Just like to speak in support of Councillor Ireland. She's given a very good representation of the Willowbank Area Residents Group executive and how they feel about the process. I think with the proposed recommendation on the screen before us, we'll be better placed to ensure that the monies collected are actually spent in the area where the impacts are felt as a result of the tea tree bioenergy facility. And I think that's a good outcome for council, that's a good outcome for our community. And yeah, just congratulate Councillor Ireland for all the work she's put in to get this going along and ready for adoption today.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Councillor Milligan.
Thank you, Mayor. I also support the motion being proposed by Councillor Ireland, and thank her for her work, particularly with the Willowbank Action Group. The key stakeholders should be included in the process for determining which projects go ahead, and of course the recognition of those stakeholders as per their input into the decisioning.
Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Any other discussion? I guess for myself, I think it's great that it's going to be really open for the people of the Willowbank Area Residents Group. So having all the figures listed up on the Transparency Integrity Hub, I think is a huge step forward, so everyone knows the information. And I've been attending the Willowbank Area Residents Group meeting off and on since 2012, so the last 9 years. And they're a wonderful community organisation that's really focused on improving amenity for local residents. And I must admit, when I did read the tea tree, I think it's attachment 1, the tea tree bioenergy payments governance model, I did have some concern with the dot points that decision-making related to the assessment and selection of suitable projects will be undertaken collectively by an internal cross-departmental working group, which is just a matter of council officers. But I do note also attachment 5, which is the project identification form, community tea tree bioenergy payments, where the weighting that for the criteria is very much focused on the local area there, which gives me great confidence that the people that this fund was meant to support, which is the people who live around the tea tree biorecycle area, will receive the benefits of this. And I just want to highlight too, in Ipswich we obviously have many waste operators, and Tea Tree have set the bar really high. They are an exemplary waste operator in our community. As Councillor Ireland talked about the fact that they worked closely with the community for 3 years to gain a social licence, and they paid for the upgrades on Cooper's Road. They come to all the Willowbank Area Residents Group's meetings, and they work very closely, and obviously they provide a fund as well to support the community. It would be wonderful if our other waste operators did 10% of what Tea Tree did. So I'd like to point out the standard that Tea Tree hold and thank them very much, and certainly the local community appreciate it as well. And if there's any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those of recommendation B, put the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and it's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item 14.5, which is the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, Round 2, funding allocation.
15.4.
Did I say the wrong? Sorry, 15.4. My apologies. The recommendation is that Council endorse the projects shown in Attachment 1, Option A, for funding under the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program, Round 2. May I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. And a seconder, Councillor Ireland. Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this? I would. Thank you. Please state your name and your job title.
Thank you, Mayor. Matthew Mulroney. I'm the Coordinator of Grants Management. Morning, councillors.
Thank you. So we're looking at how much money, where has this money come from, are you?
Thank you, Mayor. This money, and I do have a slight correction to the briefing that's been provided. The amount is actually 7.395 million. My apologies for rounding that back to $7.3 million. The money has come from the federal government through the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communication as part of their economic stimulus for the COVID economic downturn.
Thank you. And in a confidential briefing, you've obviously provided us with 3 options to where that money would be allocated.
That's correct. I've worked with the staff from Infrastructure and Environment to identify projects that are deliverable within the very tight timeframes for this program. Looking at projects that are already in our program, already in the pipeline for delivery, to make sure that we can achieve the 31 December timeframes.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions of Mr Mulroney? Yes, Councillor Ireland.
Thank you. The South Station Road.
This is a confidential document, so if we're going to discuss it, I'd have to go into closed session.
I'll talk to you later. I just needed to know what section, that was all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr Mulroney.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Ireland, would you like to discuss particular aspects of this, and we will go into closed session? This is a confidential.
I will make the inquiry later.
Okay. More than happy to do so. So before you obviously have option A, B and C. The report is recommending option A. I'll open it for discussion amongst the councillors, noting. No? Is there any appetite for us to go into closed session to discuss the details, or you're happy with option A? I'm not getting any objections, so therefore I put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Should we state what option A is now?
What I think we should
Yes.
do is append the details of option A to the recommendation.
Yes. Yes. I will now that we've come to the end of that particular one, I'm going to move now for an adjournment for 20 minutes, and it's now, I'll say 10:08, so we'll come back at 10:30. May I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. See you back at 10:30. Thank you. It's 10:30 and our adjournment has ended, so we're back to our ordinary council meeting. And we're up to item number 15.5, the naming of your places and spaces, community engagement report. I note that there are 3 recommendations. There's recommendation A, that council determine the name for Laneway 1, currently referred to as Icon Alley or Smokers Alley. Recommendation B, that council determine the name for the new children's library. And C, that council finalise the naming of the remaining places and spaces at the March council meeting. So I propose that we look at each recommendation separately. May I have a mover for recommendation A? Thank you. Councillor.
A substantive motion would be to propose the name of the place rather than moving something that's directing ourselves within the meeting to actually name something.
So what I'd like to do is open it up. I can't open up for discussion until we have a mover under our meeting procedures. Unless someone wants to propose something as a variation.
Move a recommendation
Yep.
that council determine. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. So I would like to propose a recommendation that council name Laneway 1, currently referred to as Icon Alley or colloquially as Smokers Alley, as Crib and Foot Lane.
Thank you very much. I'll have that you've moved that, Councillor Fechner.
I've moved
May
that.
I have a seconder for that, Deputy Mayor? Thank you very much. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on that particular item? No? I'll then open that up for discussion amongst the councillors. Any discussion? No? Yes? No?
Thank you, Mayor. Just like to speak to the name, the proposed name, Crib and Foot Lane. As everyone's aware, council sought community consultation and invited residents to suggest names for Laneway 1. I just note that in the responses there were lots of proposals, the names of individuals around Ipswich, as well as the inclusion of 2 well-known family names that have had a long history in Ipswich. I think it's fair to say that communities probably would be reluctant to give the laneway to the name of an individual, and the preference is probably more towards a significant family name in Ipswich's history. And, you know, it's my view that Crib and Foot would be appropriate, but also it speaks to very prosperous economic times in Ipswich, when Ipswich was once a thriving CBD and economic hub. So, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other discussion on that? Now, I just know from speaking to residents that, you know, it's really important for us to maintain those strong links to our heritage. So I think it's a really beautiful link to our heritage. And like you said, Deputy Mayor, the strong prosperous times in the CBD that will be returning. Councillor Fickner?
And just in closing, you know, it's important to reflect on Ipswich's history, and I really like Councillor Doyle's bringing to everyone's attention what that name actually meant for us as a city at the time, particularly economically speaking. I think that's a really wonderful point. I'm speaking, you know, from a modern perspective, naming a laneway something like Crib and Foot Lane, you know, it opens itself to, you know, having fun and energetic, potentially a cafe down there as well, you know, named, you know, potentially Crib and Foot Cafe. And I think that, you know, the more that we celebrate the heritage, the more we can push ourselves forward with creative thinking and what potentially that laneway could look like in the future as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fickner. Any other discussion? Councillor Milligan.
Mayor, could I just confirm with the motion as it is currently written, it's used the full spelling of the word and. Was the original usage for the store using and as and, or was it A&D?
Good question, Councillor Milligan. I think Councillor Tully, our resident historian.
Thank you,
Sorry.
No, you speak,
Yeah,
Paul.
but everyone just says crib and foot, but I've certainly seen it written with the ampersand between the crib and foot. It'll make it a touch smaller too. Perhaps we should, maybe if we could just defer that for
It
a
is.
little while.
I'm looking at the moment just at a website, that queenslandplaces.com.au, and they do have crib and foot with the ampersand in there. So can we put on the fact, Sarah, can we find out the exact place name and whether it's crib and foot or crib ampersand foot? We'll
just put a note at the end of it saying, with clarification as to whether it's an and or an ampersand.
Thank you, Mayor and CEO. Obviously, we can look to some historical photos as evidence of what it should be, but just on quick look, I'm seeing both the use of the word and as well as the
Yes.
ampersand, so council officers will need to do a little bit more digging.
If it is ambiguous, what would the council prefer?
Mayor, is there a, do we know if there is a recommended usage of words on street signage or name placings? Are we permitted to use ampersand instead of the word A&D?
Yes, look, I'm looking at a photo of Crib and Foot building from 1918, taken by Whitehead Studios, and it does have the crib ampersand foot. So how about we let the council organisation...
And just
Come back to
noting
us.
that our own ipswichlibraries.com.au reflects the ampersand there as
Right.
well.
But, sorry, I'm also looking at another one on Pinterest, and it's a bit later. Looks like it's the 50s. It's got crib and the word A&D, foot.
Yes, Mayor, so I think...
We might look at how they registered the business.
So I think if we look at the historical photos, the original building, where the signs were actually part of the building facade at the very top, it's certainly referring to and, but over time, as the shop awnings are updated or upgraded at some point, the ampersand has obviously been put on there. So anyway, further investigation.
So, as I said again, if it is ambiguous, which it appears to be, is there a preference, or do you want it to come back?
Maybe find out how the business was registered. Yeah, I think that should be a source of truth. Councillor Tully?
If I could just add that perhaps if we go back on Trove and look at the advertisements, which were prominent in the Queensland Times of the day, of how the company actually used the word and or the ampersand, I think that might give us a good clue.
Yes, and I understand what you're wanting, CEO, but I think we'd rather get the information before we make a decision. My grandmother, who passed away 2 years ago, was a secretary to a board member of Crib and Foot, Sir Tom Hiley. Would love to, if she was around, I could ask her for her advice as well. But anyway, so the motion as it sits now is that the council name Laneway 1, currently referred to as Icon Alley or Smokers Alley, as Crib and, with an ampersand, Foot, with clarification be provided on whether the name has and or was and or ampersand. Is there any more discussion on the point, on this recommendation? No, I then thank you, Councillor Milligan, for pointing out something that's very important, I think. I'll now put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to recommendation B, which is that council determine the name for the new children's library. Again, we'll probably look at a name. Would anyone like to provide a name before we move that motion? Is it the Ipswich Children's Library? So may I put forward that that council determine for the name to be the Ipswich Children's Library? So I'll move that. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would anyone like to speak to a council or relevant council officer on this? No, I'll open up for discussion.
Not quite about the naming, but will it show that it belongs to Ipswich City Council? Will there be a logo or something? Like there was a big trend away from showing that the libraries belong to council. I'm just wondering, doesn't say, it just says Ipswich Children's Library, but will there be a logo or something?
I'll ask the CEO because I do note that all our other libraries, such as even the Rosewood Library has Ipswich Libraries. Springfield Central has Ipswich Libraries on it. So I'll hand over to the CEO for his view.
That's beyond my branding expertise, but I think it'd be reasonably clear that it's provided by us, given it'll be in the middle of our admin building. But
The other libraries do have the council
sort of
emblem.
emblem as well. Look, I'll clarify that and provide that advice separately.
I'm looking at Mr. Okay, what I might do is, Mr. Poll, do you mind if I ask you to come to the lectern, just to clarify? Okay. Would you please state your name and your job title?
Certainly. Good morning. Ben Poll, General Manager of Community, Cultural and Economic Development.
And I think the question is, will this library be clearly branded as an Ipswich City Council facility? Would that be the correct question, Councillor?
I don't mind Ipswich. I don't mind Ipswich Children's Library, but just to show that it's that it belongs to the council. That
Belongs to the people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes, is the answer. There is a branding and a naming convention being applied across the libraries, and that includes the reference to them being Ipswich Libraries, including the use of the City of Ipswich logo.
That I logo?
That's right.
Right. Any other questions of Mr. Poll while he's here? No, thank you very much, Mr. Poll. Yeah, valid point, Councillor Ireland. Is there any other discussion on this?
I'd just like to point out that the use of the word, the name, or the decision by this council to use the name Ipswich Children's Library is, as Mr. Poll spoke to, it's in line with Ipswich City Council libraries, naming protocols and conventions. So to move away from that and go against, I guess, the recommendation of council officers would potentially create a number of operational issues.
I think we're very much in support of plain language, call it what it is. Yep. And it will be Australia's first ever dedicated children's library as well, is my understanding. CEO?
I believe it's the only current one. There may have been some in the past, but yeah.
Anyway.
Mayor, if I may ask,
Yes, Councillor Milligan.
considering that the Children's Library will be across the civic space from Ipswich Central Library, 2 points. One, would we ever consider having another children's library somewhere within the city? And would that then lend us to consider Ipswich Central Children's Library? Or is that being too pedantic?
Well, I guess the motion is as it is, Councillor Milligan, if you wish to vote against it. I mean, I considering it's going to be Australia's only dedicated children's library, I doubt very much that we'll be opening up a second one in the CBD.
Well, we may have one at Redbank Plains.
You can call it the Rosewood or the Redbank Plains. Deputy Mayor, did you?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate that Council's libraries team are, I guess, recommending that we follow their naming conventions and protocols. And, you know, I guess if anyone's concerned about the separation between the main library and the children's library, council staff are absolutely across that and managing any issues that may arise and watching very closely.
I guess we could say we'll leave it up to any future council to deal with. Like perhaps Councillor Wigan.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
If there's no other discussion, I'll put the recommendation B to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I see it's unanimous. Thank you. Recommendation C is that council finalise the naming of the remaining places and spaces at the March council meeting. I think we leave that recommendation as it is. Deputy Mayor?
So I note that the two remaining spaces include the function.
Rather than speaking
Sorry.
to it, may I ask for before
Oh,
we
sorry.
speak to it, may I have a mover, Deputy Mayor? Would you like to move that?
Yeah.
Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. Open up for discussion.
Yes, it's my understanding from my records that there are two remaining spaces or places to be named, and they relate to the administration building, so the outdoor balcony area, as well as the inside function space.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion on recommendation C? There being no other discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Thank you for that. We're now on to item 15.6, which is the Quarter 2 Operational Plan 2020-2021 Quarterly Performance Report. The recommendation that the report be received and contents noted. May I please have a mover for this report? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. May I please ask the relevant council officer to the lectern, please? Would you please state your name and your position?
Yes, Barbara Dart, Acting General Manager of Coordination and Performance. And this is just an update.
Sorry, I just want to ask a question.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ms Dart. Are there any specific things that you'd like to highlight or any risks or achievements that you'd like to bring to the council's attention?
Look, I think that compared to Quarter 1, we've reduced the at-risk projects from 12 in Quarter 1 down to 6. We still have 53 on target compared to Quarter 1, and we have increased the completed deliverables from 5 in Quarter 1 to 12, and the not proceeding is relatively stable there, and those not proceeding were identified in Quarter 1 and are included in attachment 2 of the report.
Right. I guess looking at that, Ms Dart, we're looking at a number of projects that aren't proceeding, which is the design and delivery of a second library pod.
Yes.
Developing an affordable living policy.
Yes.
And development of a strategic policy framework that aligns with the strategic priorities and goals for the city with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. I'll just ask if any councils have any questions on that. Will there be an impact to the? They're not proceeding at all, from what I can see in the original. That there's is it being deferred or?
Yeah, so I guess these need to be discussed again in terms of the priorities as we develop the annual plan for 21-22. But the idea, given that some of these have no budget impacts, it comes down to resourcing, but some of them you'll see are relying on, I guess, the development of the corporate plan, which will be finalised in this next quarter for commencement on 1 July. In terms of, I could probably get the GM of CCED to provide feedback on those matters, but some of those other matters are around resourcing in terms of deliverables that are higher priority up until July.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions of Ms Dart? Thank you very much, Ms Dart.
Thank you.
Mr Poll, may I ask you to... I'll get you to state your name and your position again. If
Of course, yes. Ben Poll, General Manager, Community, Cultural and Economic Development.
Mr Policy, with the design and delivery of the second library pod, it says it's not proceeding, but in another part of the document it says it's just deferred to the next financial year. Would you mind outlining what's happening with the second library pod?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, councillors. So there had been an intent to proceed with the second library pod. Budget was allocated for that, and so it was put into the performance plan for this financial year. There is a additional commitment to council that we would bring a library strategy to this council for review and endorsement, and the decision was made that before proceeding with executing and expending that budget on a second library pod, that we will get the agreement and endorsement of council as part of an overall library strategy before actually executing that. So it's referred to as being deferred to next financial. So it's still planned for, it's still an option, but it will be at the decision of council as part of a broader strategy.
Do you have a question on that, Councillor Owens?
Not so much the pod.
Microphone, yes, sorry.
Keep forgetting. Not so much the pod, but I have a question about the Redbank Plains Library. We had a community meeting there last week, and we're only given one part of the veranda, and apparently we were told after the meeting that we actually had one person too many, community members that turned up. That's really difficult for us if we can't be allocated.
Actually,
the
Councillor
whole
Island, I'll say that's probably something you can discuss with Mr Poll afterwards.
Yeah,
We are talking about the operational
if
plan.
it's the library, if we're doing a policy, can we please look at community space, please?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. May I ask who made the decision to defer the approved library pod and to swap that around with, so the strategy would have happening first?
Well, it would be under my decision making.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions of Mr Poll? Thank you. Would anyone like to discuss? I'll open it up for discussion.
Yeah, just to you, Mayor.
Yeah.
I read the table in attachment number 2. So top left, the Q1 status of these as at risk or not proceeding, and that was at, Q1. So it wasn't my understanding that these weren't going to proceed at all. It was just that they weren't proceeding in Q1, and no. And I was of the opinion that they were going to be coming back to us, as mentioned by Ms. Dart in the line of questioning there. So that was my interpretation of it. So, if people are reading and trying to interpret this, it's not that they're not proceeding at all. It's just that at this stage, because we are aiming to be an open and transparent organisation, we have to allow the council officers to come to us and say, look, this is on hold, and I appreciate the honesty there. I'm pretty excited about a few of these policies that are being developed too. State of the Environment report, which is in discussions, and the electric vehicle transition plan as well, which is something to look forward to. So other than that, that's just my commentary on it.
Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any other discussion? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Now move on to 15.7, which is tender number 15218, Trevor Street, Belvoir Park Road Rehabilitation. And there are 3 recommendations here, and I propose that we will move these 3 together. And it's, I won't read it out as of the report, but basically it's for a tender to be awarded to BMD Constructions, and that council into a contract up to potentially $2.241 million. Do I have a mover for this? Thank you, Councillor Tonic. And a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this procurement? No? And then open up for discussion. Yes, Councillor Fichtner? Yep. May I call on the relevant council officer to the lectern, please? Please state your name and your title.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
We always love to see you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Because I can see that this one's is under budget, so it's lovely to see.
$900,000.
That's right.
Saving.
Yeah, thank you. And I've no issue with the procurement side of things, just with regards to the general state of the works.
Would you like someone from the engineering area?
Please, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. White. I'll
No,
excuse
no
you.
worries.
May I have someone from IED or someone who can speak to this road rehabilitation project?
Morning,
Please state
everyone.
your name and your job title.
Pedro Barasa, Construction Manager.
Yeah, thank you and good morning. Just with regards to this particular project here and the nature and the scale of the project, I'm just wondering if there are other parts of the suburb of Bellbird Park that we have identified as being as at risk as Trevor Street in terms of its footings and the land movement that's happened there. Are there any other disaffected parts of the community that we need to be concerned about at this point, or will the remediation works on Trevor Street will that be within and I don't want you to look into your crystal ball and predict anything, but could we expect any such projects of this scale in the next 10 years with land movement?
Look, in a nutshell, it's not identified in the next 3 years of capital works that I'm aware of, but maybe on the planning side, may be able to have a bit of a chat. Yeah, so I can tell you all about the construction site on the Trevor Street, but that question.
That's okay. I'll withhold my questions and I'll refer them to you after the meeting.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you.
No.
Okay. I'll open the matter up for discussion. I just want to thank the organisation for the in the confidential documents. There's quite a bit of information and also the diagrams and maps to and the cross-section documents. Thank you very much. If there's no other discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and passed. We now move on to item 15.8, which is tender number 16063. Civil and Bridge Construction Works, Springfield Parkway and Springfield Greenbank Arterial, Springfield. This is, again, 3 recommendations. I propose that we do all at once. It's looking at awarding a contract to BMD Constructions for potentially up to $3.8 million. May I have a mover for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. And a seconder, Councillor Tully. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer on this particular project? Thank you, Mr. White. Yes. Please state your name and job title.
Richard White, Manager of Procurement.
Mr. White, has this gone to a local supplier?
No.
Why is that?
At this value, the assessment under the Ipswich policy, as it's over $200,000, is based on the amount of spend that is going to be done locally. BMD have identified that 25% of this contract will be spent in the local economy, but they are based in Brisbane, so they're not a local supplier.
Okay. Now, I do note, Mr. White, that the original budget for this was over 20 million. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's incorrect. So noted that up in the stands when I was reviewing all the documents.
Yes.
That's for the spring, as you'll note in some of the other documents, this is a multiple stage project.
Right.
$20 million is for the remaining stages.
Right.
This project particularly had a budget, which is also in there hidden away in the step, that is $5 million. So we have achieved a saving for this project through competitive tender, and also the reduced costs for delivery of outcomes with asphalt and things like that. Prices are going down. But yeah, we're looking at about $1 million saving.
Okay, I'll just ask the CEO how he'd like to address correcting the paper.
So page 2, financial resource implications.
Or 354.
We can just put a note and clarify that this was. I picked this up in construction as well, and it's a subset of the overall $20 million budget, as opposed to being $16 million under budget.
We just need a correction.
Yeah,
the public
we'll
record.
explain what the estimate for that part of the project was.
It's $5,050,000. So I got the figure just probably
Okay.
inaccurate way of recording it there.
Okay. Well, it's good to see the centralisation of procurement is yielding these savings.
So traditionally, these would have been done through local buy. The team was a smaller team, so they would utilise local buy to speed process up. Given the resources that we have in the procurement branch now, we're able to operate both of these as open tenders, take them competitive to the full market, and garner probably reduced costs for council overall.
Good to see. Thank you, Mr White. Any other questions for Mr White? No, thank you very much. I'll leave the matter open for discussion.
I just wanted to add through the chair that although I'm just in support of Mr White's procurement decisions, basically, with the top 3 that were finalised with the scaling, the BMD...
Noting that is a confidential paper, but yeah.
I'm not mentioning any names. BMD, who did win the project, had the most local buy, local spend. So although
correct,
not a local company, the scaling, the methodology is there for a reason, and it's not just the local buy that we need to address.
Yep. No, well spotted, Councillor Johnny. That yes, BMD did have the highest proportion of utilising local contractors and local people. Thank you. I guess we're all looking forward to the job getting underway in a very growing area. Any other discussion? No. In that case, I'll put the 3 recommendations to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. And passed. We'll move on to item 15.9, which is the monthly financial performance report for January 21. So that the recommendation is that the report on council's financial performance for the period ending 31 January 2021, submitted in accordance with section 204 of the Local Government Regulations 2021, be considered and noted by council. May I have a mover for this report? Thank you, Councillor Johnnick. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Would anyone like to speak? May I ask for the relevant council officer to come down, please? Can you say your name and title, please?
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Jeff Keats, Chief Financial Officer.
Just succinctly, what are the highlights of this report,
Sure.
Mr Hirsch?
I guess the trends are following very similar to previous reports and conversations where we are in front on revenues and fees and charges. That hasn't moved much more. In January, that was pretty well in line. The key area, I guess, is noting that, as identified in the risks area, we're going to take this forward as part of a budget amendment now and bring back to the council, considering the current position, looking at the facts that revenue is over, that we are monitoring labour, as mentioned in the report, and the pressure in relation to our labour budget with regards to vacancies and annual leave, and also our current underspend in terms of materials and services. We're doing a lot of detailed assessment as to whether that's likely to be spent. There's been some delays in programs and some procurement there. What's our likely forecast in relation to that being spent by the end of the year? So the key point I'd like to bring to council is, yes, it's positive in the fact that we're ahead of budget, the net results there, but in terms of operating surplus, we're in front of budget at the moment, so we wanted to reforecast that, noting that we originally had a budget deficit. So what does that look like towards the end of the year? But those key points would be around the labour and the areas of materials and services. That's in the operating space. Noting in the capital space, Mayor, we've spoken to that before in the past, yes. And I guess it's fair to say, yes, we're underspent year to date, and we need to reset that and reset the forecast to the end of the year, both in relation to the retail aspect of the CBD. Very familiar with the strategy in relation to that and where the programs of works are there. But also, as we've discussed in detail, we've got the revised forecast that will come through the budget amendment in relation to the IED capital program. But there's no major material change in that to what we'd spoken to council about previously.
Thank you, Mr Hitch. Any questions of the CFO? No, thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask for Mr Madigan? Oh, you're acting general manager in this area now. Please state your name and your job title.
Certainly. Sean Madigan, Acting General Manager of Infrastructure and Environment.
Mr Madigan, I realise that you've probably only been in the role for a few weeks, but obviously in the capital we are falling behind. In the few weeks that you've been in there, do you have any advice or an update to this council?
Yes, I do. So upon taking over the role of infrastructure and environment, I sought input from members of the department in relation to how we are progressing and how we are structured to deliver our capital portfolio. We've also engaged with other councils and had a look at the structures that they are utilising to deliver their capital portfolios, and off the back of that we are proposing something of an alignment in terms of the structure of our department to deliver on the capital portfolio. We have also identified the need to invest additional capital expenditure in the design phases of the capital program. So we have approved an additional 6 contingent workers in the design phase to set ourselves up to deliver what we commit to deliver in next year's capital budget. Those resources are in the recruitment phase at the moment, and we will have them on board in the coming weeks to actually design and prepare ourselves for the next financial year.
Was that a bottleneck for the organisation?
It is. It also ties in with services relocations. There's often delays around that, but most of that occurs during that design phase as well. One of the things we are working on is a memorandum of understanding with urban utilities, that they will turn around our request for services relocation sooner, and looking at building those relationships with other service providers such as Energex to actually expedite that process. Fundamentally though, the organisation has been performing quite well. It is behind on that capital delivery, but that was predominantly around that design phase and having boots on the ground. So it is worth emphasising that once our projects are hitting that construction phase, and as you've seen today from the procurement phase, we are actually producing some really good outcomes for the people of Ipswich. The infrastructure that we are building, is of an incredibly high standard and is going to last the test of time. We're achieving financial savings off that as a result of competitive tendering. All of that adds little bits and pieces to the timeframe in terms of your delivery. But what we need to do is structurally and functionally set ourselves up to actually effectively plan, deliver and then maintain those assets. And that is something that I am speaking with the CEO this afternoon. I have a meeting with the CEO to run past the ideas that the organisation has put forward and our analysis of current state versus future state to set ourselves up for success. But it is fair to say that with fresh eyes on the department, we're not too far from where we need to be, but what can happen with a capital delivery program is an accumulation of minor things can lead to significant delays. So what we can do by setting ourselves up for success to overcome those delays early on, we can successfully deliver our capital portfolio, and I am confident that we are actually going to be presenting to this council and the community a capital portfolio program for next year that we will in fact deliver.
Okay. Thank you, Ms Mayor. I'm going to ask a question on notice that's not to do with this, but obviously 2 weeks ago Councillor Fechner moved a notice of motion about the mowing and the grass. I know that you've been very... Are you able to provide an informal update? I know that the CEO is coming back to us with a report next month, but how are things have progressed in the last 2 weeks since that notice of motion?
Yes, certainly. So following on from the notice of motion, we conducted a fairly comprehensive review on where we're at in terms of our mowing. There are 2 components to that notice of motion. One is around providing the direction to resolve the issue in the short term. So what we have done off the back of that is we've engaged 13 contingent labours and placed pressure on our contractors to perform the works that are required. The analysis of the data showed the suburbs with the largest number of service requests, and
like Redbank Plains,
Redbank Plains, Collingwood Park, those areas there had the most number of service requests. What we have identified through that is that the black soil in those particular areas causes the grass to grow significantly upon receiving rain and the right weather conditions. What we are at the moment doing is obviously putting as much council resources into those areas as possible to resolve those service requests on time. The last update is that we are making significant progress. However, the weather at present is certainly going to be of concern with the hot, humid weather and rain, that we will need to return to there sooner. As part of the response to the notice of motion, we're also reviewing our service standards. So previously, a lot of the areas were on a 9-week mowing cycle, which a lot of the councillors in the community are aware of. We have identified that isn't sufficient, in particular in some of those areas, and we have prepared a report to come back to council to look at bringing those 9-week mowing cycles back into a 6-week mowing cycle, and the costs associated with that, which are not overly significant. In addition to that, what we are looking at doing is where we can best allocate council employees and resources versus mowing contractors that we use. So in terms of location and proximity to our depots, and just improving the overall effectiveness of the group. I will say that the officers involved take this very seriously, so they have been working overtime every day and working on Saturdays to try and produce the outcomes that our community expects, and I think they should be recognised for that great work under very difficult circumstances, but I do expect the community to see improvement not only at the current moment but certainly for next year with the report that will be presented to council for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Madigan. So, Councillor Allen, do you want to put your microphone?
I was just saying, excellent work to you and the team, and the residents of Redbank Plains will be very grateful to see that Johnson grass mowed down more regularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions of Mr. Madigan? No, thank you very much, Mr. Madigan. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions about the monthly financial performance report? I'll open the floor up for discussion. No, it was just, I think, heartening to hear that there's going to be a refocus on our capital works program, which is so very important for what we do. It's a core deliverable for our council, for any council, as well as obviously our maintenance of our parks and verges and so on. So thank you very much. If there's no other discussion, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 16.1, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Milligan on property valuations. So what I'll do is, I guess, Councillor Milligan, would you like to move that?
Yes, Mayor.
You'll move that. And do I have a seconder? And then I'll hand over to you so Councillor Doyle. I'll hand over to you to read it out and move it.
Thank you, Mayor. Ipswich City Council are required to pay a significant fee annually to Queensland Government.
Do you mind reading out the motion and then...
Oh, beg my pardon.
Sorry.
2 parts. A, that the Chief Executive Officer be requested to write to the Valuer General requesting that revised valuations be undertaken for the Ipswich City Council local government area on an annual basis, giving particular consideration to the valuation increases experienced in the significant growth areas across the city. And B, that a delegation consisting of the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and another councillor be arranged with the Valuer General to discuss the need to undertake annual valuations given the rapid development and projected population increase for Ipswich.
Thank you. Would you like to go into the background?
Sure, thank you. Ipswich City Council annually are required to pay a significant fee to the Queensland Government for the supply of the valuation role by the Valuer General, regardless of whether or not it receives citywide revised land valuations in any particular year. In fact, Ipswich City Council's most recent annual fee paid to the Valuer General in July last year was $637,000. On face value, that appears to be a fee for service. Since 2011, Ipswich City Council has only been provided with citywide revised land valuations every second year. The last citywide revised land valuations were undertaken for the 2019-2020 year. Council has been advised by the Valuer General's Office that citywide revised land valuations will not be undertaken for the Ipswich City Council local government area for the 2021-2022 year. Therefore, by June 2022, these land valuations will in fact be 3 years old. The Ipswich City Council area has a diverse community across a large geographic area that encompasses a wide variety of land uses. In recent years, high growth areas have experienced significant increases in their land valuations compared to the average across the whole city. Ipswich City Council utilises the provisions of valuation averaging and rate capping available to it under the Local Government Act to minimise the impact that these large valuation movements have on individual ratepayers. The provision of citywide revised land valuations on an annual basis by the Queensland Government would be a further step that would assist in moderating the impact of large land valuation increases for the ratepayers of the Ipswich community.
Thank you very much. Would you like to speak to any council officer?
Yes, if that's possible.
The CFO?
Jeff Keach, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Keach. Could I simply ask what the impact to the ratepayers of Ipswich City would be if proactive action by this council is not taken with regards to this?
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned in the discussion point, council officers and through the CEO and council previously have written requesting for an annual valuation for a number of years. As you say, we've been on a biannual basis. The key impact, as you highlight, is not so much the overall increase in Ipswich as an average as a whole, it's the variation that happens across the city. So what can be large increases in certain pockets and not large increases in the others. The ability to deal with that with the current provisions just means that you end up getting a lot of movement in your valuations and therefore potentially in the rates bill. So by having an annual valuation for us would mean that it helps us in trying to moderate those increases across the city as part of our rating policies and strategies with you. So that's why our recommendation always been with those levels of growth to try to have it more regularly than not. As I say, it's been every 2 years previously, but this year will be a third year before we potentially receive the valuation, hopefully next year.
So in short, having those valuations available makes it more fair for the assessments of the general rate.
Yes, helps us manage the potential increases across the city in particular areas, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the CFO? No, thank you very much. CEO, would you mind explaining the impact that this has to, I guess, the organisation financially and operationally by not having the annual evaluation?
What happens is when valuations are spread out over a longer period of time, then the variations become more significant. And as Mr. Keach said, it's not that the average valuation moves, but it's the valuation moves in different areas. So, for example, say we had a significant increase in value in the west of the city as opposed to in the east of the city, and there's a longer period of time between the valuation, then that movement will be greater and there will be greater challenges and I guess sticker shock for ratepayers when they see in the western part of the city their rates go up and those residents in the eastern side may well see their rates fall or stay flat. What I guess from a real operational perspective, what it does do is then occupies our rate staff in dealing with disgruntled ratepayers who see a greater variation in annual rate bill than they would see if you had annual variations. And of course we pay for an annual variation and we only get them once every 2 years. You might argue that the Valuer General will argue, well, if I do them annually then you'll pay $1.2 million. I'm not sure about that. But that's the issue. The longer the valuation gap, the more likely you're going to get starker changes in valuations, and therefore you'll get harsher movements in rates for the general community.
So what's the financial impact to the organisation?
There's little to no financial impact. This is really in terms of your ratepayers.
So it really does impact the community.
Yeah,
So
it's a
by
community
not doing
issue.
this, it's really a disservice to the community. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any other discussion? Councillor Tully.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. This is a matter which has gone on for far too many years, because local government fought over 20 years ago to have annual valuations provided for in the legislation because of the uncertainties and the problems which have been raised. That where we have properties, the property market increasing, you get a real dichotomy and a problem which can be partially remedied by averaging and capping, but which provides a situation which is very difficult for the community if it goes for more than 1 year. The curious thing under the Valuation of Land Act, under section 72, is that these are described as annual valuations, even if they're conducted every second or third year. They're still described legally in the Act as an annual valuation. Section 74 of the Act provides a couple of circumstances where it's not practical because of circumstances to have a valuation, or where a market survey has been done by the Valuer General. I don't see any situation in the case of Ipswich where we've got increasing property values in our Western Corridor through the Springfield area, Redbank Plains, Ripley Valley, the Walloon area, and other parts of the city where they're increasing. And as the CEO pointed out, what happens when they can still legally call it an annual valuation, even if it was done 5 years apart. And it's time that local government really continues to stand up, because we are paying for this, the community is paying for it. Most of the valuations which are done nowadays are desktop valuations based on the data which the Valuer General already has. It's in their system. It's not like the old days of 30, 40, 50 years ago and more, where they'd walk the streets and check individual sales. The data is already there, and not to issue a valuation has a long impact on the community, and ratepayers are affected. We have some powers to ameliorate that, as I said, in relation to averaging and capping, but that can be a difficult situation as well, because you've got people who are on a cap for a number of years. It's the only thing we can do given the situation, and I think local government will, and the people of the local government, not council so much, as the CEO says, you raise the revenue that you need to raise in each annual budget. But where you've got wild variations which are occurring, and for example, the Courier Mail will print every few months the average sale prices across southeast Queensland, and therein lies the real problem. And what I'll do is to undertake as a member of the local government policy executive to re-raise this issue, because this is just beyond comprehension. It's a joke. It's just a matter of the state government saving money and not doing what they're required to do under section 72 of the Act, and that is to have a real annual valuation. An annual valuation means every 12 months, not every 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. I'd like to thank Councillor Milligan for raising this notice of motion. I think it's outrageous that the ratepayers of Ipswich pay for an annual valuation, and the last one was we're paying $637,000 for nothing. And not only that, but the ratepayers are actually getting a disservice, and by not having a land valuation every year, it could be every third or fourth or fifth year, is not fair in both ways, for their land valuation as well as the fact they have to pay for it. It's a very bitter bill that we have to pay, and it's not fair. So thank you very much, Councillor Milligan. Any other discussion? There being none, I'll then put the matter, those two motions, motion A and B to the floor. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. It's unanimous and passed. There are no 17 questions on notice. There being no questions on notice. My apologies, Councillor Madsen. So Councillor Ireland has got a question on notice from the floor.
Could Council Library Services please...
Could you please fill there?
Could Council Library Services please provide a report on whether or not some of the space that's used for the library book returns at the Redbank Plains Library be returned for the children's services, or can we look at extending that library to put children's services back in there? Because Councillor Madsen and I are aware that there's only one C&K in the area, and a lot of the children from the non-English speaking backgrounds are missing out on that opportunity to
So I think that's
speak
just a
English.
normal information request that you could put through, Councillor
Well, I'd
Ireland,
like
that
a
we...
report on it, if we can get some of that space back.
Well, that's a motion that you're putting up, not a question on notice. So
Okay,
I think
all right.
that we need to follow due process and be fair to the council organisation if you want to put an information request, and then if a report follows on from that.
All right.
Yep, thank you. And happy birthday for yesterday, Councillor Ireland. There's no other business. I'll now close the meeting at 11:25. Thank you.